a lot of remembering what we talked about. And then I think a balance of perhaps inflecting what we discussed without inflecting too much to leave poetry that certainly feels more like poetry, more open to interpretation. And then poetry that perhaps feels maybe more Shakespearean or more prose-like. To possibly.
Yeah, I mean definitely. Well, I mean the first two words you said to me in the lift when we were coming down was battle rap. The first one I wrote of these was the Malvolio one, which was originally kind of very kind of either battle rap, hip hop meets poetry influenced thing. But then as I went along, I realised that I'm a white middle class kid. So kind of writing entirely in that mode wouldn't be true to me because that's not where I come from. I just have an interest in it. So I thought that if I wrote entirely in that style, it would not only would it seem a little condescending to people, it just wouldn't translate as well. So then, what you kind of I think really brought to it is that when we were discussing about how some of them are very true to Twelfth Night itself, and some of them are very Shakespearean, like I'd say the Viola one is very much like a conventional monologue, which flows from comedy to tragedy.
With like Malvolio's dish, for example, as that. I mean, that example, I came across guards at your beck and call, but it didn't seem to dawn on you at all. You denied it was notorious. Wrong, because my music, the way in which that's written is not like rap. It's not like spoken hip hop. It is something new that doesn't exist already. There is battle raps that are online, which is one person rhyming against another person. They sort of fight back and they sort of put each other down, which is almost like what Malvolio does, and a little bit like what Orsino does. So I don't think that it's. I think it's possibly a new way of delivering poetry.
I was trying to kind of fuse those forms.
How did you go about writing from specific points of view?
I looked at each character in detail. I focused down on kind of what in my mind made them tick, and kind of linguistically essentially I looked at what quotes from kind of the play about them I found interesting. I mean, for instance, I'll be revenged on the whole pack of you is for me the be-all and end-all of what makes Malvolio entirely interesting. There's more to it than that, but I wanted to kind of excavate, I guess is the word. I wanted to excavate Shakespeare. I wasn't criticising what Shakespeare does at all, as you can probably tell in the language. I love it, but I wanted to look at kind of almost kind of unfinished business, I guess, because my original plan with this project was not just to focus on Twelfth Night, was to look at Iago, Malvolio, Hamlet, as you see the fact that I reference all of them within the text. But then looking then
I love the Othello reference.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. But then once we did the Twelfth Night seminar, I started to and the fact that I've seen Twelfth Night I've seen a lot of Twelfth Nights in the past year, and they've all been, whether they've been on TV or live, like the one Woods did or the Propeller one, and they all offered something completely different to me. And then I started to realise, in my opinion, that for me, because Twelfth Night's this play that that is a comedy, but has so much tragic subtext to it, and in a way that I don't think, for instance, like The Tempest actually does that in quite the same way. I think The Tempest or something like that is a lot more episodic. Whereas for me, this play is so interesting because all these characters, especially the main characters, the ones where I was excavating rather than creating, they're all so much in flux in terms of whether they actually are kind of fulfilling that comic role or that tragic role. And that's what. So I guess to answer your question, I took kind of key quotes. I started to look at in detail what they said to me about the character, and then I kind of projected those characters and saw where either what I was interested in their kind of their past, their present, or their future, and where that might lead to or lead from.
What made you order them in that way?
Kind of all sorts of reasons.
I think it's neat that Orsino starts it, because that's the start of the play, and it's neat that Feste definitely ends it.
I'm glad.
That's perfect. Does Viola fit in the middle?
She doesn't actually, interestingly.
What made you position them?
But basically, I think in terms of it as a kind of a cohesive narrative, what I wanted to do is I wanted to present the characters who are kind of within the island first. I wanted the narrative to kind of gradually move outwards, I suppose, and the idea of lots of these kind of characters who are within the island kind of they're kind of very inhibited, in my opinion. Like, I think Olivia, like that kind of, the fact that I called it Olivia's Truth was me kind of, in my opinion, kind of looking at how Olivia always has this mask on, or she never really lets her guard down, but there's something about Cesario that awakens this kind of sexual frisson in her, but that never gets awakened. She never gets the chance to kind of fulfill that. So I guess in terms of the sequence, I was looking at kind of the islanders kind of gradually trying to kind of push out and seek something, and that kind of climaxing with Olivia, who just kind of, the shutters remain up, she can't help it, and that's kind of summed up by the fact of, like Feste says, the Gatsby reference to like her voice is full of money, which is the idea of kind of the fact that like all these characters are kind of trying to push upwards or push downwards, like Toby's trying to push downwards, Mariah's trying to push upwards in terms of class boundaries. But none of them can, because her voice is full of money. It's just the way that she is. It's just as Daisy is in Gatsby.
But then that's also really clever because Feste just goes around from house to house just trying to get money.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really clever.
Okay, well, thank you. So to finish, like, to answer your question, okay, and then those four characters, the full kind of, I use the word immigrants to you, kind of like immigrants into Illyria, who come into Illyria, who apart from Viola are kind of, as well as Fabian, are those characters where I was like I suppose the captain was the most creative piece I did. From what I remember, the captain was the second one I wrote as well. I wrote Malvolio, which was very kind of hip hop, me thinking about like the hip hop Shakespeare Company and all of that, which is a thing, if any of you know. So I didn't just make it up. And then I did the captain, which was a lot more me being kind of a bit more creative and innuendo-y. And stuff, and then the rest of them all came very, very quickly. But there was a massive gap between Malvolio and the rest. So yeah, I guess it's kind of the narrative is a gradual pushing out.
It's really quite cool listening to it because of the different ways that the poetry is working with the different styles. Because each character would speak in a different way.
Yeah.
So Feste would choose each individual word very specifically. Whereas Orsino at the start, is very flamboyant with his words. And so the style of the character and all that, it definitely works as an audience listening to it. Like, you definitely feel that. It works.
But it's style of character versus the forms they choose personally. So when Feste wants to sing, when Feste sings, he sings. Yeah. When he speaks in usually very short exchanges.
Yeah.
Whereas, so when he talks here, he talks in haiku.
I'm really glad that comes across. The thing with Feste was that when I was coming to Feste as the last one I wrote, I was like, kind of Feste does all these things that I'm trying to do. I wanted to kind of almost, reverse a lot of what the characters do. I mean, Orsino was really interesting for me because I've seen Orsino acted in so many different ways, and something about the way all the actors I've seen do Orsino, none of them have worked for me. And then I was like, is that just because none of them were good actors? And it wasn't really. It was just because I think that part is so compared to all the other parts, I think it's why I put it first, because it's such a difficult, problematic thing, because do you approach it as an archetype? By looking at kind of production history, and looking at like the kind of reference to T. Nunn,
I love that.
which is I was kind of looking at kind of performance history a little bit. I mean, if I could do it again, I'd probably extend that to other characters.
What did you learn, or what have you learned as a writer, listening to your writing being performed?
The first thing I said to you when you started doing a lot of them, especially the Mariah one, was when I performed it for the assessment, I focused really heavily on how dark it all is, and I did it kind of as use this word again, metatheatrically. I did it as an actor performing these different parts. I mean, what you taught me, I think, was the idea of kind of the fact that lots of this it happens anyway. I don't need to force it out, and the fact that you made lots of them much funnier, much more comedic, kind of reclaiming the comedy of Twelfth Night in a funny kind of a way, because I strive so hard to look at kind of Twelfth Night as a tragic comedy or as a different kind of play. You kind of brought that anyway, naturally. You got that from what I was saying to you, and then added the comedy back all in.
Yeah, I think what was the really good springboard from like, our discussions throughout the day, throughout the morning, was for you to say, well, this character is more masculine, and and the way you'd like to bring out a hint of that for Orsino, for example, with Olivia. Perhaps this is more reflective in her wanting happiness. So let's start there. With Mariah, perhaps she is aspiring to be better. Perhaps she is that sort of more grounded character, looking upwards. And just to have a starting point for each of the characters, and to start from the truth that you're wanting to share in your pieces. Once you know that, any comedy that comes out isn't like put on comedy. It's not added on.
Yeah.
It's something that happens either because that's what I'll naturally go towards as an actor, but it's not imposed. So each piece that we worked through came from. I really like the more cakes and ale, Sir Toby. One of the references you gave was sort of Boris Johnson-esque.
Yeah, King Clark and Boris Johnson.
Yeah. And just little ideas that you offered, then blossomed into a big idea in my head of what that could go into.
Like when you first did that, you were kind of subconsciously kind of like just fondling your belly, like in funny, and now like you didn't even notice you were doing it, but then I was like, do that. One of the major things that I was influenced by when I did this, and when I performed it, but then I was kind of transferring that into what you did, was I saw a piece called Iago, like years and years ago at Fringe, like well before Warwick, and it was basically Iago doing Othello, purely from Iago's point of view, and there was this amazing moment when the guy who played it was kind of quite a kind of skinny, weedy, tall guy, who kind of then somehow inflated himself to be Othello, and I don't know how he did it, but it was just amazing, and you were kind of doing that, and that was kind of, physically, that was the influence kind of for this. I started visualising lines in my head of like kind of like a cross, of where like there was a kind of a line, it's kind of, because I used the word liminal a lot when I was talking to you about it, and kind of the idea of where like there's a sliding scale of masculine to feminine, and where I'd kind of quite like to do this, I might do it later, where kind of the characters slot in on different areas, and some, like, I think, and I kind of said to you, like, Orsino and Olivia are opposite, in my opinion, this is what I think, you guys could disagree with me, but like kind of they're opposite ends, and then you have people who get gradually more and more blurred, and that's kind of, that was kind of what I was talking about.
You can take from any, whether it be how self-assured you are to not too self-assured,
to
how happy you are in your status to how.
And then there's a kind of a cross-section of where it's kind of characters in terms of their status, like I said to you, whether they're looking up or looking down, and then there were characters like Sir Andrew and Mariah, where I was like, with this character, I want you to kind of blur that boundary between masculine and feminine.
So I want to ask the audience, who's your favourite new character?
The captain. Yeah. Just because it was where you really let loose with your imagination, because the text could allow you to do that.
Yeah, there's no constraint in the text at all. It is complete fiction, and it's brilliant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my favourite was Fabian.
I love Fabian. Again.
Having done that huge speech at the end where he says, "Good madam, let me speak," and then finally it reveals what's been going on, and then being left to clean up after.
Yes,
it's lovely.
And that broom had been like the biggest prop for the smallest character.
Yeah.
But also between the two of them, between the captain and Fabian, you get the comedy, the tragedy.
Yeah. I did like the viola one.
Thanks, I'm really proud of that one.
No, that's
really
good.
If you like it, then you should have put a room on.
Sorry. There are many more hip hop, like R&B influences in there that you might not get.
Beyonce is not R&B.
Is she not?
Olivia likes it and she wants to put.
Well, I mean, I won't like bore you with too much of this, but like there was one like Inhale, Exhale is a reference from a hip hop song by a rap group called Cypress Hill. And the whole thing about hit it and quit it, which is James Brown, was kind of like, but like in that, like then when I started...
But just tell the camera that all of them have been very neatly footnoted and credit has been given so that nobody is going to be...
what she said.
It's all there in the bibliography.
It is. Here it is. No. The whole thing of like a true Elizabethan G, that's the way a play's got to be, and the thing of like, I hit it and quit it. Originally, I wanted it to be explicit, all those kind of rap influences and words like that, but then I was like, that would just sound stupid coming from me. So then I was like, for Olivia's nothing but that to me. Originally where that was, I was going to put Olivia's nothing but a bitch to me. But because that was kind of, but that would have been so much more, again it would have been me making a value judgment, it made me making a value judgment on the character that isn't there. And I mean, I think if I'd done this, say, last year, if I'd been doing Shakespeare last year, that's probably what I would have written. Because I would have been a lot more, because when I did, I won't give you my whole history on like Shakespeare, but like when I did Lear, I was so much more, I'm proud of that, but I was so much more, I'm kind of making value judgments on Shakespeare. Whereas I think like doing this has taught me that like,
There's a subtlety to
they
this.
can be there anyway, yeah.
But being a director and being a writer, giving your work to someone else in this instance is so much, it's just completely different, isn't it?
Completely. Cool. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you.
Please, would you mind saying that again?